Why did Oa cancel the Green Lantern party?
I don't know.
There wasn't enough time to plan it. Welcome to the greatest DC comic show on YouTube. It's great to have you here for Fanboys Live and the Retro Review. I'm Ryan Magic Lasso, joined by Signature King Tony. How are you doing?
I'm great.
Awesome. And back with us is Comic Food 2814. And how are you?
How's it going, everyone?
Good to have you back.
Glad to be back. Tony, are you hearing Lasso out of only one ear?
No, I got.
Just me?
Well, it was that way for like the last 2 weeks. It was that way, but this week I guess he was playing around. He fixed it, so now I got them both.
Oh, okay, weird.
Yeah. You're like 2 weeks behind, man.
No, well, I can only hear him out of one ear. That's what I was asking.
Yeah, in 2 weeks it'll correct itself.
Okay. All right.
What about this? Check 1 2.
I only hear out of the one.
Oh.
Check 1 2. Check 1 2.
I still got them both.
Welcome to the live show where we do sound check.
Yeah.
How was everyone's free comic book day?
Wonderful.
It's good. I didn't get out for it though.
I enjoy Free Comic Book Day. A tradition that I've been doing for Free Comic Book Day since 2020, I think, has been getting the foil of what do you call it? Foil of the year. So in this one, can't really tell, but Superman's been shot right above the collarbone and he's falling down to Earth. So maybe an homage to Bloodsport, maybe. I don't know. Who knows?
Kryptonite bullet.
Yeah, but it was a pretty good comic book day, free comic book day. This is the only one I picked up. I just don't need to pick up the other one because you got the foil. We got the foil.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
It's great. Everyone loves Free Comic Book Day.
Yeah. I had a nice free comic book day. Store I went to had really good sale on back issues, so I stocked up a little bit, found some nice stuff, and spent some time with some friends. So it was nice.
Good. Very nice. Yeah. Always get out there and support your local shop for sure.
Sure.
Was everybody doing the Star Wars quotes?
Yeah, it was everywhere. It was everywhere. And it's my sister's anniversary. You know, they're big Star Wars fans, so they had to get married on May the 4th.
Oh gosh, yeah.
So that was fun.
And today is Revenge of the 5th, right?
Yeah, but I went with Cinco de Mayo instead.
Okay.
Star Wars Day was yesterday. They don't get 2 days. They don't get. When's DC Comics Day, huh? None. There's no DC Comics Day.
Well, there's Batman Day.
Yeah, but that's not DC Day. There's no Shazam Day. There's no Green Lantern Day. It's Heroist.
Yeah.
They get to pick and choose what heroes they want. You can't be having that. It's for everybody.
That's right.
I like your shirt, Lasso.
Oh, thank you.
Team awesome.
There's some Neil Adams artwork there.
Very cool.
Oh, nice.
Very cool.
How were the last few weeks? Sorry I wasn't able to be here. I had some family stuff.
Some of the greatest 2 weeks now.
Greatest, yes, I'm sure.
No, it was good. I've been reading up on DC's Absolute Power, which is what the Free Comic Book Day was tied in. So it's pretty Amanda Waller heavy. It sounds like she's going to take on Justice League directly. She's been promoted from within the government, and now she's taking them out, I guess.
Hey, priorities, right? Got to take the Justice League out.
Got to.
When I read the preview, I'm like, this is a Tony story all over it.
I'm very excited. Yeah, I am going to really enjoy it. But looking at some of the covers coming up, and holy cow, there's some really good ones. There's a nice Wonder Woman cover if I can find it. Yeah, where she's all strung up with her own lasso.
Yeah, I saw that. I think
That's
that's
pretty cool.
for 10, issue 10 maybe.
Okay. Did the Zatanna issues come out yet? Or is that, I forget when that was. She's getting that Black Label series. Is that out yet?
I'm not sure, but I know I saw it solicited. So
Yeah, I don't recall when that comes out. Yeah, I'm not sure. Not sure, but yeah, Absolute Power coming out. It's gonna dominate comics in July, and then from what I understand, that's gonna directly lead into the, Scott Snyder DC kind of rebirth, if you call it. I don't know what else to call it until we get an official title. The kind of reimagining of the DC universe. So, and apparently, the lead Green Lantern won't be Hal Jordan. I guess in that universe, he's already established. He's peak Green Lantern. So the Justice League is being formed behind, in the timeline behind him. So, I guess it's either going to be John Stewart, is from what I understand. So,
yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, no Kyle Rayner. We want a good Justice
Poor
League.
Kyle. Is he even in any of the books now?
I don't know.
I don't think he is, right? There's no Titans or anything with him in it.
Not that I know of.
Not
that I know of.
I'll say hello to Super Russ 9000, who's joined us in the live chat. Great to have you stopping by. If you're watching us in the rewind, we appreciate you stopping by as well.
Mr. Russ went from just 1,000 subs, and now he's at 11,000. Or last I looked, he was 11,000 subs.
Wow!
In the span of 3 months. He's dropping them shorts. He's had a couple of shorts. He had a couple shorts go 11 million.
Wow.
Yeah.
Hello to John's Comics with Kids, who's joining us before his D&D session.
And I high five myself when I hit 400. Yeah, we did it. Mission accomplished. What can you do? DC homies. What's up, John?
What's going on news-wise?
Hey, John.
News-wise, I couldn't really find anything, but I want to circle back around because Fu wasn't here. I want to get his input. So James Gunn teased the Green Lantern, but we don't know if it was movie Green Lantern Guy Gardner or the Lanterns TV show. It was a white glove, kind of doing the power fist. It was a white glove, had the ring on it. The ring was bloody. Who wears white gloves in the Green Lantern Corps? I said Guy Gardner. Hal Jordan sometimes wears white gloves.
Yeah, that's Hal Jordan.
You think? Okay. So he's teasing. So he's teasing the Lanterns, I think.
And I believe there's a variant cover or something like that of that image.
What run was it? Or volume?
I don't recall offhand, but it rings a bell.
Yeah, but check it out. Go back and look at James Gunn's Twitter feed. John, I really want them to nail a court. Dude, heck yeah! I'm so excited for Lanterns. So excited. I'm gonna watch that show religiously. That is gonna be a really fun show, I think. And I imagine you're gonna be glued to the TV, Mr. Fu, when that show is. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. In fact, I've just been rewatching the animated series. Man,
that's a great series.
It is so good. Series. It never gets old.
It doesn't. It really doesn't. I like the fact that they hide the Blue Lantern, in the ship.
Yeah. Oh man, that show so needs a second series, but
I was surprised it never got a second one.
Oh, they could have gone with Sinestro going yellow and introduced some of the other spectrums. It would have been nice.
I'm sure that was part of the plan. I'm sure it was, but
yeah,
funding.
They did such a good job with the Red Lanterns, though.
Oh yeah, they did. At the time, I was working at the hospital. I wasn't married. I didn't have kids. I was working night shift, so I watched every DC animated everything up to that point. And it was. I remember that show. It was awesome.
Yeah,
it really was.
I'll say hello to Kenneth Bird who stopped by. How you doing,
Mr. Bird? But yeah, news. I mean, it's been quiet, real quiet. I don't have any DC news. It's been mum's the word. We talked about the Superman casting last week. They found their Ma and Pa Kent. But other than that, it's been crickets from the gun side of the house. Just looking forward to Absolute Power for me. Getting ready to hit up some cons. My cons list this year exploded. I'm doing like probably 12 cons this year. Normally I would do 3.
Wow.
Yeah. It's going to be fun.
You're going to be broke.
Yeah, it is. My goal is to be the biggest channel on YouTube that doesn't get paid. Hey, nothing wrong with goals. Nothing wrong to have goals. You're doing it right now. Congratulations, Russ. You did it. Tell us how you did it so we can follow you. Yeah, but it's con season for me. Looking forward to it. I got another one. I have a con coming up in a month. Two in a month. And I don't know if you guys are big video game players, but the voices of Grand Theft Auto 5 are going to be there. So I have an old big Grand Theft Auto poster. I'm like, why not? I'll get them to sign it. It's not comics, but it's cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, no news, unfortunately. You guys got anything?
No, I don't.
No, I couldn't find anything either.
Yeah, they keeping us on the DL, that's for sure. Oh, look who's here.
SCG.
SCG. Who just, I believe, came from a con.
He was over in Austria. He got to meet Varangian and Vigilante and has confirmed that he is real and not AI. That was so awesome. I didn't know he was going there, so I saw the picture of the two of them together. And at first I was scrolling, I'm like, wait a minute. And I scrolled back, I'm like, this is a real picture. And VV is real. I knew Jason was real, but VV is real.
Yeah,
I think Jason's the first one in the community that's been able to verify his existence.
Now, how do you know that image wasn't AI though?
It was AI. I don't believe it.
No. Hey Ben, how you doing?
Ben Compton, what's going on, brother? I want to give a special high five to Jugs Kingdom, who went 24 hours on a live stream, just talking about books, just hanging out with the comic community. 24 hours.
It's insane.
That is incredible. Yeah. Happy Cinco de Mayo, everybody. Everybody get their tacos in today? I did.
Pizza.
That was the last thing that I needed was tacos. Let me tell you what. But yeah, Watchmen, huh?
Yeah, are we ready to get into it?
Yeah, as we segue into the retro review, this was Comic Foo's pick. Tell us a little bit about this pick and your choice behind it.
Well, when this goes way back, even before the Fanboys. Before we had started our first stream, Tim and I had been talking about doing this show and kind of doing this retro review on some of the great stories of DC Comics, right? And so I think we started with Superman, Death of Superman, and then we always intended to go off and do some others. And I thought, I just got to think about it. I was like, what are some of the best stories out there? I'm like, we have just been ignoring one of the greatest of all time, and that's Watchmen. It's got to be like in the top 3 stories in comics for me. So I thought, let's do it. I think most of us know the story because, of course, they had that was a Zack Snyder movie, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was. That was such a good movie, like so comic accurate. I know there were some differences, but I've always enjoyed this story, so I thought, let's do it. So tonight we are going to be doing the Watchmen. Let me get my screen share here.
And this was my first time reading it after seeing the movie. I've read it before. Let me rephrase that. I've read it before.
Okay.
I read it before. Then I saw the movie, but I haven't read it since I've seen the movie. And it just, there's certain panels in my issue that was like, yeah, that's right. They did this exact panel in the movie. And it's just kind of neat to see that.
Yeah, if you've never read the book and you've only seen the movie, it's going to be weird because the movie pulled like like specific scenes, like the angle and everything is pulled straight out of the comics, even the music. It's really neat. All right, so I will start with issue number 1. This is a 12-part series by Alan Moore, 1986. And it starts off here with this blood in the street kind of being washed into the sewers. And there's this happy face pin sitting there. And we get a page out of Rorschach's journal. Basically reflecting on, I won't go into all the details, but he's reflecting on the state of the city and the decay of culture and things like that. And he has this kind of vision where you know, the politicians and all will be drowning in you know, their own filth, and they'll look up and shout, "Save us." And Rorschach will look down and whisper, "No." So it starts out just the same as the movie. You can see Rorschach with his sign, "The end is nigh," as he walks through the blood, and the guy washing it off is yelling at him. And that's when it takes us to these detectives looking out over this broken window up above, and they are investigating a crime, a murder where somebody has fallen or possibly been thrown out this window. They're noticing that the chain on the door has been kicked in, so they're theorizing, well, it's got to be a really strong guy, probably 2 people. This is thick glass. You know, you're not just going to be able to, you're not going to trip and fall through this glass. You're going to have to be thrown through it. They're also looking at pictures of the guy, and they realize that whoever the victim is, he's extremely well built. They're guessing that he put up a decent fight. And they also find this picture of him shaking hands with President Ford. But they can tell, you know, this guy really tried to defend himself. There was a fight and a brawl, but ultimately he was thrown out this window. And of course, we're getting scenes here through the killer's eyes all throughout as the detectives try to figure out what's going on. We see what actually happened, and he was in fact thrown out. And you can see his little pin there. Got a little bit of his blood on it, but that's what Rorschach saw on the ground. Let's see. And as we're as we wrap this scene up, we've got the detectives. They actually talk about Rorschach and his being a vigilante, and how there were some other after there was something called the Keene Act passed in 1977 that basically put an end to mass vigilantes. But Rorschach continues. And they're mentioning this too as they're passing by Rorschach, who of course is not in his mask at the moment. That's him right there with the red hair. So he hears them. He goes back to the scene at night. He finds the pin on the ground, and he takes out his little Batman-esque gun here to grappling gun to climb up the building and get into the apartment. So he gets up there and he immediately starts looking around. We get kind of these quiet panels here where he's looking for some kind of secret, and eventually he finds it in the closet. You can see the little button that he presses there. And when he does, a secret panel shows up, and we see that whoever this victim was, he was also a superhero, and we see his suit here. For those familiar, this is the comedian. So Rorschach lays this all out, probably for the cops to find or something would be my guess. But then we flash over to this other scene where we've got these 2 guys, and they're kind of reminiscing on the superheroes of old, like many, many decades ago. Again, they're just reminiscing about old times. You can tell each of them were a superhero at one time. In fact, we learned that these are the Nite Owls, right? So you've got the original Nite Owl there with the gray hair. That's Hollis, and then you've got the younger Nite Owl, also retired though, And so they're saying goodbye, and the younger one, I can't think of his name offhand, but he's walking down the street through these alleys, makes it home, and there's somebody waiting for him in his home. And of course, it's Rorschach. He's opened up a can of beans in his kitchen, and he's just eating them there cold, getting bean juice all over. And he's like, "Yeah, I helped myself to some beans. I hope you don't mind." So instantly, the Night Owl, though, he recognized Rorschach. He's like, "Okay, what are you doing here? I don't mind." And Rorschach throws this little, throws the button down with the blood on it, and says, "Take a look at this." And Night Owl's like, "Is this bean juice?" Or and Rorschach's like, "Yeah, human bean juice. Belonged to the comedian. He's dead." Um, and Night Owl's like, "Well, wait, what do you mean dead? Like, what happened?" And he's like, "Well, he threw him out the window. Somebody threw him out a window." So the Night Owl's like, "Hey, look, you're making me uncomfortable. Let's go downstairs and talk in my basement." And that's where we see his secret hideout. Again, very reminiscent of scenes straight out of the movie. Um, and Rorschach's basically here to warn the Night Owl that it's his theory that the comedian was killed because somebody's hunting down, and he's warning him basically. Night Owl calls him, "Hey, you're a little paranoid," and he's like, "Yeah, I'm Rorschach," you know. Um, so he goes off. Oh, before he leaves, Night Owl's like, "Hey, remember the old times? We used to have so much fun together. Whatever happened?" And Rorschach's like, "Well, you quit," and he walks off. So, and there you can see the Night Owl with his suit in his locker, very Batman-esque. Well, I think if anyone, Rorschach's more of the Batman character because he's such a detective. All right, so now we've got back to Rorschach's journal. He's up on the rooftop, and he basically his journal is just like collecting all of the awful things that he observes throughout the city. Um, but he's like, "Yep, somebody down there knows a comedian died tonight." So he goes into Happy Harry's bar and grill, and instantly the bartender recognizes him, and he's like, "Oh, please don't hurt anyone," you know. Uh, and Rorschach's like, "Well, um, the comedian Edward Blake, he was a friend of mine. Somebody killed him. Who knows what happens, right?" And you got this guy over here trying to be all clever with his friend, talking about Rorschach needing deodorant, that sort of thing. So Rorschach walks up to him, takes his little pinky finger and snaps it in half. And that's when he asks the entire crowd, now that he's got their attention, if anybody knows what happened to his friend who was murdered. Nobody answers, so he takes out his index finger. And again, nobody answers. He realizes nobody knows, so he walks out and leaves this guy on the floor with two broken fingers. Next, we've got Veidt Tower, and up here, Rorschach is talking to I guess his name's Veidt. He's the smartest man in the world, and they're up in this penthouse like kind of office here, and Veidt used to be a superhero as well, but when the Keenak came about, he quit and went full on businessman, right? Selling toys in his image when he was a superhero, that sort of thing. And Rorschach's kind of, making fun of him a little bit, but he's also, again, there to warn him that he thinks that somebody is out to kill superheroes because somebody took out the comedian. So he's just, again, there giving his warning, and then he takes off. I'm kind of going through this a little quickly. There's a lot more text throughout this, but it would take me a long time to get. Highly, highly recommend reading this. All right, so then back onto his journal, talking about some of the different heroes from the past. Again, I'll just kind of skip through this. Um, and he decides that there's two more individuals that he needs to warn. So he goes to this science lab, and that's where we get our first appearance of Dr. Manhattan. And they, of course, instantly recognize Rorschach. Um, the girl here, Jupiter, she not pleased to see him at all. She's immediately upset that he's there, not a fan of him, and she starts laying into him. And Rorschach's like, "Look, I'm here because the comedian's dead. I came to warn you both." And the woman here has a very hard time with it because, as she mentions, the comedian actually had an altercation. I'll put it that way. Keep it kind on Lasso's channel, but
Yeah.
he more than an altercation, I guess, a bit of an assault on her mother. And so she reminds Rorschach of that, and Rorschach, he's Rorschach, so he's very dry and monotone in his speech, and doesn't really give her the response she wants. And so she's like, "Get out of here, you creep." And she asks Manhattan to enforce it. And Manhattan's like, "Yeah, you're upsetting Laurie. You need to go." And Rorschach's like, "Well, hey, I made it all this way. I'm not leaving until I've had my say." And by the time he says that, Manhattan has already blinked him out into the outside the building, outside the gate. So you see Rorschach standing there all by himself, like, "Had my say." So I like that little scene. So he walks away, and Laurie tells Manhattan that, hey, she's got to get away. She wants to go out and do something. So do you mind if I call Dan? We haven't seen him in a few years. Go out to dinner with him. Manhattan's locked in his work. He's trying to solve some discovery. And he's like, yeah, sure, go. And so she calls up this guy Dan. They plan to go meet for dinner. Rorschach again, still walking through the city, thinking about what's happened here, trying to wake everyone up. We go over to dinner where we've got Laurie and Dan. Of course, that's the Nite Owl. And we see that they were longtime friends, possibly romantic, and but they're having a nice little dinner, just catching up on old times. And that's when Dan puts down the button that Rorschach gave him, and they're talking about the comedian some. I'm gonna jump through this. They're so they try to lighten up the mood. They have like kind of like this nervous laughter moment here, right? Where they're reminiscing about some time when Rorschach dropped a guy. Well, there was this villain who wasn't really a villain. He just enjoyed getting beat up, and so the team would try to avoid. They just be like, "No, dude, like we're not beating you up. Leave us alone." And they're like, "Yeah," but then Rorschach dropped them down an elevator shaft. So they have a good laugh over that, and they comment on the fact that there hasn't been many laughs around these days lately. And Nite Owl says, "Yeah, well, what do you expect? The comedian is dead." And that's where issue 1 drops off with a nice little Bob Dylan quote here. "At midnight, all the agents and superhuman crew go out and round up everyone who knows more than they do." And again, if you're familiar with the movie, you'll notice that there's Bob Dylan music throughout, and yes, that also comes straight from the comic book. So I've always thought that was pretty cool.
Yes, because I heard all the music when I was reading this book.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. In fact, there's one scene like towards the end, I think, where they even like match the music to the comic scene, and they get it like just perfect in the movie. Yeah, it's definitely cool to read the book and then watch the movie and see how well they did it. But
Cool.
All right.
Cool.
Issue number 2.
I'll say hello to a few people who have joined us. I Collect a Lot is here. We have Paul S. here and Howler Mouse all joining us here. So that's pretty awesome. Thank you guys for stopping by. So you guys feel free to jump in because I really have no familiarity with Watchmen at all. So feel free to jump in at any point if I'm missing out on something for issue number 2. So we start out with Laurie, and she's in a relationship with Dr. Manhattan. Well, now she's over on the West Coast. She's been blinked over there, and she's at a retirement village where she wants to see her mother. In the meantime, John, who is Dr. Manhattan, he's going to the comedian's funeral, comedian better known as Eddie. So she's talking to her mother. Her mother, Sally, was the original Silk Spectre. So they're talking, and she kind of knows why her daughter's there, and she's talking a little bit with sympathy for Eddie Blake, who is the comedian who has died. And as they're talking, we keep flashing back between what's actually going on with the funeral at the present moment and then Laurie's conversation with her mother, Sally. Well, in the course of the reminiscing, she remembers a night, they look at an old picture from 1940 of the Minutemen, and she remembers the events of that picture taking place, how they were discussing the war in Europe. And that's when the original Nite Owl stopped the discussion, said, hey, let's go down to the owl's nest. And Sally said, well, I'm going to stay behind and change my clothes. She lets everyone know that. And then as she believes she's alone, she starts to change into her clothes. And then the comedian comes back in and kind of interrupts her. And that's where the assault that was mentioned in the previous issue started to take place at. And she gets upset. Sally does. She kind of claws his face. In the meantime, Justice walks in. Now, I'm not very familiar with Justice. So Justice walks back in and kind of stops it. And those two get into it for just a brief moment. So as we go on, like I said, we keep cutting back and forth between the funeral and different people's memories of the comedian and what's going on. So we have Adrian recalling his first meeting of the Crime Busters, which was held by Nelson Gardner, who's Captain Metropolis. And we're kind of in April of '66 now, where Nelson attempted to recreate another team of masked Avengers since the Minutemen's breakup in 1949. But the comedian kind of said that his plan, was bull honky, and accused Nelson of just trying to seek personal glory of playing cowboys and Indians. So now we have Nite Owl 2 defended the Crime Busters idea by saying he and Rorschach had made some success together fighting criminal gangs. And Rorschach kind of agrees with him, but he saw the group more as a publicity exercise. So, and then is it Ozymandias? Is that correct?
Osmantius.
Okay, so
Yeah.
Right? Osmantius, yeah.
Okay, Ozymandias chimed in that the group only needs the right person to coordinate them. So,
And I think that's a character from like Greek mythology or something.
Yeah.
okay. All right.
Yeah.
So the comedian's still kind of mocking the group's intentions and arguing that crime busters wouldn't make a difference in the world because they're heading to a nuclear apocalypse anyway. And then they burn the presentation board, and he burns the presentation board and then leaves the room with everyone else pretty much following them. Nelson is begging them not to leave, telling them that, that someone has to save the world and it should be them. So as we're back again with the funeral and more recollections, at this time it's Dr. Manhattan, and he's recalling something called the VVM Night, which was a celebration of America's victory in the Vietnam War, which happened because of his intervention in Saigon. So Eddie Blake, the comedian, and him are discussing the attitudes towards life and war, and he kind of sees everything as a joke, although Vietnam was not a good joke. And he mentioned how anxious he is to kind of get out of there and leave the country. Well, this Vietnamese woman approaches him and tells him that she's pregnant with his kid, and she asserts that that the comedian has a responsibility to the child, but he doesn't care. He's like, I'm going to forget about you, and I'm going to forget about this entire country. She gets angry and breaks a glass bottle and kind of slashes his face. And he impulsively turns around and shoots her. And Manhattan is watching like all of this. And the comedian then lashes at Manhattan for not intervening to try to save the woman, and accuses him of not caring about human life, because he's like, you could have changed the bullets to something else instead of what they were that killed her. And he kind of walks away looking for someone to heal his face as he kind of talks about Dr. Manhattan losing touch of humanity. So our next story, and I know I'm going a little bit fast here, but there's just a lot of ground to cover. So our next story is Dan Dreiberg, recalling how he and the comedian worked riot control in the 1970s police strike in New York. The streets were really crowded with angry rioters, but the two of them and Dreiberg's Nite Owl clear the streets after the comedian throws a gas bomb into the angry mob. And they see the devastation and they say, well, what's happened to the American dream? And Eddie Blake, the comedian, simply replies while staring into the foggy streets, it came true. You're looking at it. So by this point, as we're moving on, the funeral's about, it has ended. It's come to the end. And they drop the comedian's smiley face badge into the grave. I thought that was a real touching moment there. And then there's this man in a trench coat who leaves flowers on his grave and then walks to his apartment. And I wasn't quite sure who this was. But Rorschach ambushes this man, and I think he leaps out of the refrigerator. And Rorschach identifies him as Edgar Jacob. No, what is it? Edward
William Vaughn.
No, I thought he was Moloch the Mystic.
Edgar William Jacobi. I'm sorry,
Jacobi.
also known as Edgar William Vaughn, also known as William Edgar Bright.
Okay. So he's questioning him about Eddie Blake, and he's kind of wondering if he's the one maybe who killed the comedian. And he said, well, he attended the funeral out of distress and then talked about it's like a joke he didn't get. And he mentions how the comedian came to see him maybe about a month before, but he was really drunk and wasn't making a lot of sense. And the comedian found this drug, which was a fake cancer cure medicine that's widely illegal, and he was going to report him for that. And the villain explains that he was diagnosed with cancer and he was desperate for some type of a cure. And Rorschach kind of comes to the conclusion that it wasn't him that killed him, but still thought it was a little bit odd that he showed up at the funeral. So then Rorschach goes back to the cemetery at night to pay his respect to the comedian.
I'll just throw a little bit of backstory in there. So the guy that Rorschach's talking to, he's a villain basically, or was a villain known as Moloch, and so he was at odds with the comedian. But I guess later in life, again, it was kind of in this weird moment, the comedian came back to talk to him. Kind of like, like the way the Joker's always like, hey, Batman, you and I are connected in some way. It's like that.
All right. So we got Rorschach going back to the cemetery at night after the funeral's over with. He's paying his respects to the comedian. And then he kind of leaves the cemetery with a red rose. And then the quote that ends this issue is an Elvis Costello quote. And it says, and I'm up while the dawn is breaking, even though my heart is aching. I should be drinking a toast to absent friends instead of these comedians.
Very nice.
Very cool.
All right, I'll let you share there, Tony.
Yeah, no problem. Coming in here. All right, so issue 3. A lot of scenes in my mind after reading this issue that was like, really in the movie. So, yeah, this was definitely a good issue for me to pick. So it's starts off with the city of New York putting up fallout shelter signs on all the designated nuclear fallout shelters, which is a great indicator that maybe you don't live in the best of times. Maybe there's something wrong in society. But anyway, we start off here at the newsstand, and it's a newsstand owner and a young comic reader. But here we have Mr. Rorschach coming in to ask about his issue of New Frontiersman, and the newsstand owner says, "Of course, I'm going to hold it for you. No problem." He goes back to his business, and Rorschach swings back around to scare the bejesus out of him, just to make sure that he promised he was going to save his issue of the New Frontiersman, which I thought was funny. So we cut to Laurie, and she's stirring the spaghetti sauce with Dr. Manhattan. And this is a funny scene in the movie. This scene made me laugh. But it turns out it is 2 versions of Dr. Manhattan with Laurie. And she doesn't like that at all. She runs out of the room to find the real one. She thinks she might have found him, and she's telling him how much she didn't enjoy that, thought it was disrespectful, wanted them to have this intimate moment. So she throws a glass at him and it misses him completely. And I thought that was pretty funny, like, really, how are you going to hurt this guy? Like, of course, you of all people are going to know there's nothing you can do to this man. But anyway, he's like, well, I don't understand. I try to, please you. I don't understand what doesn't do that anymore. So she jumps in her cab and she takes off. But on the other side here, we have a lady giving an interview. And I already forgot her name. Gosh. Okay. So anyway, Laurie looks like she's going to go visit a friend here. And it is, I already forgot his name too. My God, I'm so terrible at names.
Dan, Nite Owl.
Yeah, Nite Owl. Yeah. Nightwing was popping in my head, but I was like, it's not Nightwing. She goes and visits Nite Owl, and they're having some coffee, and, she's kind of confiding in him the issue that they're having in the relationship. Meanwhile, Dr. Manhattan is getting dressed in the coolest way imaginable. And he's got a big interview coming up. And the way his tie ties, like, it's just so cool. I'm easily entertained. But yeah, they're getting ready to head out. Dr. Manhattan's going to the interview. They get to the interview, and Nite Owl and Spectre are kind of going into like a corner alley here, and what looks like they're going to be followed by some not so friendly individuals, and they kind of hold them up at knife point. Meanwhile, Dr. Manhattan is giving this interview about who he is and what's going on, what he can do, whether or not he's going to intervene in this war in Afghanistan that the Soviets are about to invade. We cut back to Laurie, and her and Nite Owl are kind of going to town on these gangsters. And, there's a person in the audience of the interview. He said, hey, I write for this newspaper. Do you remember a person named Wally Weaver? He worked with you in the 60s, and, he died of cancer in 1971. And Dr. Manhattan's, of course I know him. He was a great friend of mine. I attended his funeral. So yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. What's your point? And the gang fight continues, and Nite Owl and Silk Spectre are having a pretty good time handling these bad guys. It looks like they're not breaking too much of a sweat. And the interview continues, and it's like, what about Miss Janie Slater? Doctors gave her 6 months to live. Is there any connection to that? And Dr. Manhattan doesn't really understand. Of course I know who that is too, but like, they have cancer. Like, I don't see how those two are related at all. The battle is over with the gang members, and they're trying to catch their breath, and they're both coming out. Looks like they're pretty unscathed. And the reporters are kind of swarming Dr. Manhattan. He does that really cool scene, from the movie, and I said, everybody leave me alone, and poof, just sends everybody in the studio somewhere else. And when I first saw the movie, I was like, dude, he killed all those people. Like, what a jerk. But yeah, the fight's over. The skirmish is over. They're kind of watching the replay on TV. I know I'm kind of skipping a little ahead here. There's a lot of meat on these bones, but yeah, Dr. Manhattan goes back to his little apartment, and the army there is putting a big radioactive hazard sign on the door, and it looks like that he was ordered to do that. Probably wasn't there before. And the young army guy is talking to Dr. Manhattan, and he's talking about taking a trip. And it's funny because the guy's like, "Oh, where are you going?" He's like, "Oh, I'm going to Arizona, and then I'm going to Mars." And then just Dr. Manhattan does that cool poof thing, and all of a sudden he's in Arizona at the nuclear test site, and he's grabbing some old mementos, I guess, from an old office. And then he sees kind of Mars in the distance. The little red star in the sky, and he just poof. Meanwhile, we cut back to the street here, and Rorschach is kind of talking about what happened, and to the newsstand owner, and we cut back to Dr. Manhattan's apartment, and everything is just being taken because it could have the potential to cause serious amounts of radiation and whatnot. And Rorschach is confronting Nite Owl about the whole thing, and it's a huge mess. The Russians are invading Afghanistan, and at the same time, when I almost said Rorschach, but when Dr. Manhattan is on Mars, the Situation Room in the White House is talking about this huge missile strike and the Soviets and nuclear missiles, and we're debating on whether or not taking out half the eastern seaboard is that something they can tactfully lose and still maintain the ability to strike back. And finally we see Dr. Manhattan on Mars just kind of sitting there looking at his photos, and we're left here at the end of issue 3 with a quote that says, shall not the judge of all earth do right? He gives a Bible verse here, Genesis chapter 8 verse 25. But that wraps up issue 3.
Nice.
Awesome. So thoughts and discussions about where we're at so far in this story?
I would agree that this is probably one of the more classic DC stories. I like the story anyway, even going through the reread. So I love it.
Yeah, definitely one of my favorite reads. There is a lot of text. I'd say, the artwork is good. It's definitely good, but it's also doesn't necessarily jump out as something like overly special. In fact, I don't even know who did the art, but the story itself is just so well done. There's so many different angles being introduced. You're introduced to these characters and you don't know their backstory, like Dr. Manhattan and Rorschach, right? And even talking about the older heroes, everything's being done in flashback. So it leaves a lot of questions for the reader, which I think is fun because many of them do get answered throughout. And it's hard to create an entire universe, right, in just 12 issues. But even just in these first 3 here, we're seeing it unfold. It's obviously our universe, but like kind of an alternate timeline, right? I don't know if you guys caught, but that was Nixon at the end there, right? So, but think about that. In the 80s, that doesn't really make sense. So,
yeah, because the story takes place like 1985, I think.
Yeah. So, yeah, and you'll definitely start noticing similarities, but also little differences, right? So,
well, yeah. One thing I got to compliment this issue on. It is really hard to have we've seen it in a couple of issues so far where they have 2 stories happening at the same time going down the panel. It's really hard to do that, but I think the Watchmen's a great example of how to do it right.
Yeah. Oh, and we haven't seen anything yet. We're about to get all. Yeah, there's a whole nother side story coming here. Yeah. So Lasso, you've never read this book?
Never read it. Never seen the movie.
Really?
I was definitely aware of what it is,
right?
And that it's so. I went into this knowing that this is going to be very well written, which it is. And I didn't have time to read all 3 issues. Normally, when we do a retro review, I read everything that everyone's going to do, even if it's not the one that I'm focused in on. Right. I knew who the Rorschach character was, and I've heard of Dr. Manhattan, but don't know much more about Dr. Manhattan than the name. Okay. So I felt like I struggled a lot and really needed, because I feel in the general DC universe, I know a lot of characters, even some obscure ones. But it definitely did live up to being well written, which I expected it to be.
Dave Gibbons, okay.
I guess, someone say, why haven't I don't know. I don't want to say I didn't have the interest, because that's not the right word.
Well, it's not continuity, right? So if you're invested in the DC universe,
that's a little more
easier
where
to
I
skip.
am. Yeah, that's a little bit. I think if there were characters I was more familiar with, that would have grabbed me a little bit more. But I definitely was aware of its influence and that it's a very well loved and respected series. Hey Gore, how you doing?
Oh, yeah,
That was against my will.
it was.
But it was still worth it.
Well, I didn't realize that you hadn't read it, so hopefully you enjoy it. I think you're in for a real treat. Man, if you haven't seen the movie either, that's going to be fun. And I would recommend don't watch the movie until after we're done reading it, and then definitely watch the movie. You'll be blown away.
I guess what also, because these comic books are longer than a normal comic book is.
Yes.
They're about a comic book and a half. I think that's probably pretty accurate to say.
Yeah.
So that was a little intimidating for me going into that. And I'm like, so it's definitely not that I didn't enjoy it. I thought my issue was very good and definitely has lived up. I don't know these characters. So I just feel like I'm really out of my element.
Yep. That makes sense.
Yeah, they were the Watchmen, universe was pretty big at the beginning of DC Rebirth.
Yes.
They have a big role to play.
Well, and actually, New 52 kind of revitalized Watchmen because that's where we had before Watchmen.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they did some prequels and stuff, right?
They did, yeah.
Yeah. And didn't this really launch let me know if I got this wrong here. Didn't this really launch the Vertigo line for DC?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, it's Alan Moore, right? So we've done a little bit of his Swamp Thing run, and if you remember, it's very different than a lot of other DC. It's a lot darker and kind of it feels like he brings more of the real world into it, and you get that sense through Watchmen. I mean, obviously, some of the topics in this aren't the easiest to discuss, right? But that's Alan Moore. I mean, he goes into those places.
Well, then didn't it launch some type of secondary line for DC where they started doing more stories that are out of continuity?
Yeah, maybe if it didn't launch it directly. I mean, I think it definitely had a big lasting influence in terms of just kind of indies and again, that darker kind of grittier book. Yeah, best comic story written. I agree. It's fantastic. This for me ranks right up there with Jeff Johns' Green Lantern run and Death of Superman. But in terms of this is probably the best written one for sure. Yeah.
Yep. But I don't consider Vertigo to be an independent line. I mean, they're owned by DC. So I'm sure they are, but to me, they're not.
Yeah.
Because their characters come to DC all the time. Look, Watchmen's come to DC.
Hey,
Rorschach has come to DC. Constantine's come to DC. So are they really independent? No. No, not really. Not really. That was a good run.
So we'll start segueing into the book show and what's going on with our channel. This time I'm just going to go first. On my channel this week, I dropped a Star Wars themed back issue of the week because we had Star Wars Day yesterday, so the Force was with me. And I did a comic book editions video with my birthday haul, my 2024 birthday haul. And so that's on my channel. That's a good idea there, Paul. Although I think the retro review, long time before I was on, I think you guys did one of those with the Jack Kirby Super Friends or Superpowers. I mean, I think you guys did. I think I remember watching that.
Yeah,
I don't remember,
but I don't think it was both of them. I think it was just one of them. But anyway, on my channel, of course, there'll be a DC Comics Silver Age themed back issue of the week YouTube short, and the keyword tomorrow is short. So that drops tomorrow morning on my channel. I have an update on how my Justice League of America haul is going. So I set this goal to do 12 JLA books a year for the next 3 years, which would get me complete on volume 1 if I did that. So I just want to update that a little bit of where I'm sitting with that. So that's what's coming on my channel. And for a book show, I decided to show you what free comic books I picked up yesterday.
Oh, very cool.
So I did the Absolute Power. This is the main A cover from the book that Tony showed at the beginning. I highly recommend, if you guys didn't get this, to see if your store still has this.
Oh, gosh.
Because there's a lot of DC Comics characters in there. It's almost all DC Comics characters inside it. It's fun. And the other free comic book day I decided to do, and I bought this simply because of the name. I couldn't hold back because of the name. Barkham Asylum.
Wow.
That's too funny.
So those were my free comic book day picks from yesterday. Who would like to go next?
I'll go. I dropped a short today for Cinco de Mayo. And we showed off some Mexican comics that I have. So speaking of which, I'm going to show you one right now. And I've got a couple of these. Thanks to Mr. Lasso for pointing the gentleman out who was selling them. But I did grab a couple of copies from him. I have a third one sitting around here somewhere. So this Shazam 28 Mexican variant cover, which is pretty cool. I also have almost the same cover, Superman 28, but it's magazine size. And this is a Spanish, as in from Spain, Iberian Peninsula cover, obviously of Shazam 28. So pretty cool.
Are the interiors black and white or color?
This one they're black and white, and this one they're in color.
Okay.
Which is pretty neat. I don't know why one was in cover or color and the other one wasn't, and I don't know why one is a magazine size and one isn't.
Yeah.
One's not even the small one's obviously not even. This is a regular size comic book back and board, and this is a magazine size. So interesting how different countries publish different stuff.
I did not.
I did not.
No. All right, my turn.
Yep.
So I actually didn't know what I was going to show for my book show tonight, and then shortly before we went on, I got a package at the door, and I'd forgotten I'd ordered this, but I think this was a pre-order. This is the and we were just talking about superpowers, right? So this is the new McFarlane superpowers. They've got Kilowog. I thought that was pretty cool.
That is pretty neat.
So, yeah, I guess McFarlane's not just doing the old stuff; they're bringing out new characters too with this line. So that's pretty cool. That's like the Fourth Lantern based one, because I think there's Sinestro, John Stewart, Hal, and now Kilowog.
Nice.
They need to bring back Chipped.
Yep. Now I've got him in, I think it's the Icons line. In the accessories pack, you can find him.
He's an accessory?
He's with the accessories pack. Yeah.
Oh, jeez. Well, I guess if the Red Lanterns have, what's the cat's name again? I can't remember. The Red Lanterns have a cat.
Yeah.
He's a Red Lantern.
Gosh, now it's going to drive me nuts.
Yeah, it's going to bother me too. I can't think of the cat. Kudos to anyone in the chat who can remember the Red Lantern cat's name. So hurry up and Google it. I can see it. I just can't.
Star something or?
I think you're close. It does start with an S. Dexstar.
Yes.
Dexstar,
Okay.
Yes.
We did it. See, we don't need the chat.
We don't need the chat. Dexstar. Dexstar. Yep, Dexstar. Howler Mouse. Howler Mouse wins the cookie.
There you go.
Right.
But I think Paul has a good question. Fu, when are you seeing your new YouTube channel again?
No plans at the moment, but we'll see.
I'm a big numbers guy, and there's a lot of channels that I watch, on the back end, and you keep losing 10 subscribers at a time.
Oh yeah.
It's really funny because it just says, I don't know if that's true, but for subscribers, it just says -10, -10, -10,
Hey,
-10.
James.
Those bots.
Yeah, right. The bots are leaving, but that's too
Yeah.
funny.
Cool. Well, that brings us to the end of the greatest DC comic show on YouTube. You've been watching Fanboys Live in the Retro Review. Thank you to the live chat who joined us. Thank you if you watched on the rewind all the way to the end. We hope you have a fantastic week, and we look forward to visiting with you again next Sunday night. Take care. Night.